Hi there. It's 7 a.m. here in Jaipur right now. And of course, I've woken up unusually early. So, what are we doing today? Well, to kick things off, I am taking a morning walk here in the hotel where I'm staying. But we'll continue this walk later in the day, and we'll continue the walk within the older city of Jaipur. For now, this is the newer part of Jaipur. The place is called Vidyadhar Nagar, and amazingly, Vidyadhar Bhattacharya, as modern a name as that sounds for some reason, actually designed the city of Jaipur. It's a beautiful place they've got here, and clearly they're maintaining it well with all that greenery. And when it comes to morning walks, I absolutely love them because how calming and peaceful they can be, and they give the right kind of start to your day. But unfortunately, I'm not able to practice what I preach. I've not been waking up early for a long time. It's just Jaipur which has now made me wake up at 7 a.m. And here we are exploring, for now, just the guest house. But this guest house, as I mentioned, is in Vidyadhar Nagar, and Vidyadhar Bhattacharya, who was born in the 1600s. Can you imagine? Somebody with such a modern name was born in the 1600s, and he was living in Amer, which was like the previous big city of the Rajputs here, and he was the chief architect who helped develop Jaipur. Continuing the previous conversation, Vidyadhar Nagar is actually a place which was built in honor of the chief architect. So sometimes when I see such windows in long dark corridors, it gives me this prisoner effect. So I ended up spending a few more hours in the hotel than I had planned. It's afternoon now and I haven't stepped out, but now I will, and so will you, and we'll explore the old city of Jaipur. So here we are. We are about to enter through the old city of Jaipur. This is one of the gates that we will use to enter, and because there's a gate, we can already make out that this was built as a walled city. There was a wall around the whole city, a bit like many of the other historical cities where the wall primarily serves a defensive purpose, so that if people come and attack you, as was common at that time, you can defend them from the other side of the wall, and hopefully you can climb on the wall and use height as an advantage as well. So that's how Jaipur was built as well. This area that we are walking through right now is called the Chandpole Bazaar or the Chandpole Market, and the gate that we entered from is also called the Chandpole Gate. Something makes me wonder if there's a connection to the Chandni Chowk in Delhi, but I've not been able to confirm or deny that. Usually, whenever you will be in this area or on this road, which is the Chandpole Bazaar, you will not see this kind of view. You'll actually see that it's jam-packed, because this is one of the most crowded areas of the Jaipur city, the Jaipur old city. But the reason you're able to have these nicer and quieter views is because today is a public holiday. On your left now, you will see what's called the Hawa Mahal, or the Wind Palace. That's what it literally translates to, because it was built as a palace, which would be very windy, because of course Jaipur, which is the capital of Rajasthan, is a very, very hot city most months of the year, of course especially during the summers. So this was built as a very airy and comfortable palace, especially for the women folk of the Rajput family, which was the ruling family here. Of course, as you can notice, I haven't stopped at Hawa Mahal and you haven't stopped, and there's a reason behind that. So the reason we are moving is because my plan for today and your plan for today for Jaipur is to have a more zoomed out view of the city. So we started from the older city, which is the walled city of Old Jaipur, and from here we'll keep going north towards what is the much older city of this area, which was the Amber Palace or the Amber Fort. It's spelled as Amber or Amber, but it's called Amber. So yeah, from the walled city of Jaipur, we'll go towards Amber. As I mentioned, it's a much older city, a much older area, and it's a famous tourist spot. The fort in that area is called the Amber Fort, and within that fort they have a palace which was specifically for the king and the queen and their family, which is called the Amber Palace. So yeah, in our zoomed out tour, you can see we've just now exited the walled city and we are heading north towards the Amber area. As you can see, today my exploration is a moving exploration. We haven't really stopped as of now. We did move by the Hawa Mahal or the Wind Palace, and as I keep moving on this road in the north direction, there will be one more palace coming to our right, which is called the Jal Mahal or the Water Palace. And we'll see, if it's not too crowded, maybe I'll stop there. So I did end up stopping here. I'm just crossing the road now to reach the Jal Mahal or the water palace. It's so interesting how in the late 1700s, wow, the king here and the architect here who was building Jaipur thought of building a water palace as well as a wind palace. And the water palace or the Jal Mahal was actually built as a hunting ground or a hunting station for the king at that time. Pretty common, I guess. Alright, so as we cross by these beautiful bougainvillea on our left, I'm now taking you towards the Amber fort. In the distance, what you see are actually the hills that we'll be climbing. Those are the Aravalli ranges or the Aravalli hills, which is a huge hill range within this area, and atop that hill is our destination. Now, as you can see, probably we are climbing up to reach Amber Fort. This was exactly the reason why the fort was built at the top of the hill. Expanding a little bit on what I spoke earlier, so the reason this fort was essentially built, and wow, did you catch that peacock flying across the road? Anyway, so you can see that's the wall, the way cities were built at that time. So Amber also had a wall, but the reason this fort was built at a height is obvious, so that it's difficult for the enemy to reach the king and the kingdom, and it's also easier for the king and his army to fight off any intruders and any attackers. And of course, at that time, there were many people that the Rajputs had to defend themselves and their city from. There you go. In the distance, what we see is the Amber fort. Maybe I can just call it Amber because it's easier on the tongue. And the Amber fort is very old and it's been reconstructed a few times. But originally, I think this was built in the 1500s, and of course, it predated Jaipur as well. This is where everyone lived when there was no Jaipur. And I think, just as the previous video, this one will probably capture a beautiful sunset as well. So the Amber fort is actually one of 3 forts in this area, if you did not know. So those 3 forts that I mentioned are Amber and Jaigarh and Nahargarh, and they were all meant to be defensive to fight off the enemies. Okay, so I think I've been giving too much information when we should just relax and enjoy this view. Of course, what you see right in front is the man-made lake and also the moat, which was to again act as a defensive shield against invading forces. That lake also served as a source of water, and oh my god, I'm again giving information. Beautiful. Those bougainvilleas somehow look extra pink. How do I try to not give you any information? I'm still in the same general area. I've just been walking around doing a little bit of walk with me as much as I can, like the old times, and of course enjoying these views. That looks like a banyan tree, but I don't think it's banyan, or maybe it is, I'm not sure. So there's one more interesting piece of info that I want to share. Maybe I'll quickly share it. So the Amer fort was of course the big fort, but the Jagar fort was built to protect the Amer fort and the Amer kingdom, and the Nahargarh fort was built to protect Jaipur, which was the newer Rajput city. So that was kind of the purpose of these forts, to protect each other. So unfortunately for me, and also unfortunately for you, I will have to keep this tour or this video as a shot from a distance video because the Amer fort is closed today. As I mentioned, today is a public holiday, and for those of you who've been attentive enough, maybe you already know which holiday it is. The time that I have been talking about, it was a time of immense volatility in terms of different kingdoms fighting with each other and taking up land. Of course, there were the Mughals who had originally taken up a lot of land, especially in the north of India. The Rajputs had a good cordial relationship with the Mughals, as I also mentioned in the last video. They had married within the Mughal families as well, and therefore there wasn't really much of a reason to fight with the Mughals because the Rajputs in fact were fighting for the Mughals. But there were definitely other kings and kingdoms that they had to be aware of and plan for. Oops, that's the elephant barking. But yeah, as I was saying, they had to protect themselves from many other kings and kingdoms, such as the Marathas. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, there were definitely a few fights with the Marathas because the Rajputs were fighting with the Marathas both on their own behalf and also on behalf of the Mughals, and the Mughals in turn were giving them the riches, which in part helped develop Amer or renovate Amer in the Mughal architecture, and of course it helped build a number of other places within this area as well, such as the city of Jaipur itself. And yeah, continuing the previous thought, it was in that volatile and violent environment that the Rajputs had to make sure they are building a city that's safe. So of course they built Amer on the top of a hill, and as you can see, it's having these huge fortifications. And in order to protect Amer, they built the Jaigarh fort, which is, I think, at a higher elevation on one of these hills. And in order to protect Jaipur, they built the Nahargarh fort. So again, so much of defense, you see. Now, as the sun is setting over the old kingdom of Amer, we are driving back towards the newer city of Jaipur. I don't think we will get a chance to explore the Nahargarh fort because it's quite some distance off this path, but we'll definitely see more of Jaipur. So there you go. In our zoomed out tour of this area, we are getting out of the walled city of Amer, and we'll soon be getting into Jaipur. There you go, from one wall to the other. We are kind of exploring the architecture of walled cities in a casual way, of course. And here we are back at Jaipur. So that's our Hawa Mahal. It's lit up quite nicely within this old 300-year-old city of Jaipur, and we will follow the route that we'd followed earlier today, which means we'll explore the Chandpole market area as well. And wow, look at that. All of Jaipur is lit up quite nicely now. And in this zoomed out tour, as I mentioned earlier, we'll just keep driving. We'll not really stop. For tomorrow, I'll probably stop, and you guys will get to explore more of the zoomed in perspective of Jaipur. For today, you can just adore these nicely lit up buildings of the Chandpole area of Jaipur. And this is it, I guess. We've done our exploration for tonight, and I will catch you very soon, and we'll explore Jaipur zoomed in.